Arteta! What a strike! What a screamer! Zola! And a fantastic goal! Arsenal back in it! Here's Limpar, lines it up, finds the net. Arsenal in front.
Arsenal put away their Europa League knockout tie with a first leg 3-0 victory. Think we can't find stuff to complain about? Think again. This is the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast. My name is Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter, Yankee Gunner. You're probably going to want to after this game because I think we're just going to bitch about it. 3-0 away, kill off a tie, first leg in Europe, on to the next round, nothing to worry about, focus on the Carabao Cup final. Yeah, we can complain about that. Just watch us do it. Now, having said that, neither Paul nor Tim have shown up to do it. So it's just me and Clive today. Clive's on Twitter at ClivePAFC. Hello, Clive.
Hello.
I think the interest in participating in this podcast will only be rivaled by the interest in listening to this podcast, if I guess. But there are some interesting things to get to, and I think just the first thing that we should talk about overall, before we get into the granular stuff, is just, look, it wasn't a classic. The level of competition was not great. They looked overawed by us for the first 20 minutes, and they paid the price for that. But should we maybe at least pause to have some appreciation of the fact that we did the job, we got it done, we killed off the timing? This is the competition that matters most to us. And at a time when we just lost the North London Derby, we've probably fallen out of the top 4 race in England. How important is it to come home from this feeling like we've steadied the ship a little?
It's really important. I mean, from a competitive perspective, the game was not very competitive. They may as well have handed out bibs that we could train in. Do you know what I mean? Because it looked like a training session to me. But yeah, I suppose I'm still hurting from the North London Derby. So I'm sure there are many people listening to this that are still hurting from that game and still hurting from watching the Champions League games over the last couple of days this week. And I think that's all goes to create a funk over Arsenal, which is like we've sort of exited ourselves from a party that we were always in, and we just chucked ourselves out of the party. And it feels like we have to show a little bit of humility and grace and suck it up and say, okay, we messed up. This is where we are. We're in Sweden, -5, with snow all outside the ground on a plastic pitch, playing in front of 2 men and their dogs. It's not really where we want to be.
Even Tim didn't go to the game, for fuck's sake.
Yeah, even Tim. I'm starting to question Tim's commitment, by the way. He's only been to about 4,000 games in about the last 2 years. But yeah, it's even Tim said, you know what, that's not for me. Right? So, which is really concerning, right? So, it'd be interesting to see the attendance at the home game next week. So,
well, yeah, I mean, that talk about training session. But just really quickly, to be a little fair to Ostersunds, I mean, do you think the fact that they're out of season right now, that they are not in season, you can only get so much intensity from training. Do you think that can explain at least that first 20 minutes that they came out just not looking competitively ready?
Yeah, they've had some decent results when they were competitive, but I think I heard they've had one game since December, and that was on Sunday. And so you just can't do it. You can't get yourself to those levels. I think they try to get their game going, and they try to get their passing game going, but much like Arsenal, sometimes they're passing the wrong places of the pitch, and they encouraged us on, and there was a difference in level, as we would expect, right? We're multimillionaires, our footballers, and these guys are working their way up through the levels. So it was nice, it's nice to just get it out of the way. But I don't think there's many conclusions from the game, but I'm sure you'll find some points we can discuss.
Think the first conclusion we can come to is that the badge at least could use a little rework to make it Nacho Monreal FC. This guy just pops up with goals now. Are you sort of surprised that end product has become a big feature of his game this season? I mean, the irony is we were playing Oxlade-Chamberlain at left wing back to start this season, theoretically, with the idea of adding some dynamism and explosiveness into our game, and here's Nacho Monreal leading the team in goal scoring.
The credit to him is his approach to games. He just turns up to play football exactly the same as he did the week before, regardless of the surroundings, who he's playing against. He turns up and says, I'm ready to play. Are you ready to play with me? I quite like him. I love watching other sports, right? And I always watch NBA and rugby, and I think you can learn a lot from watching other sports about your own sport that you really love, and if you watch it closely, you can see similes. And I call Monreal like our Russell Westbrook. He turns up every night, plays hard, right? And Westbrook's the same. And it takes attitude and approach is something you can control. And he's obviously got ability, but to apply that ability every single week at the same level of intensity, every single training session, 4, 5, 6 times a week, and then turn up at football and do exactly the same thing again. That's what makes a professional footballer, and that's exactly what he is. And there's a lot of our players could take a lot of lessons from him.
Yeah.
The fact he's worked it out at 32 is a privilege to him. But right now, none of us would swap him, would we? None of us would.
No, and I mean, it's interesting, right? I mean, he's keeping Kolasianc out of the side, and that's another debate for another day. I mean, I think it is interesting that in the game that had suddenly taken on such tremendous importance to us, Xhaka and Kolasianc are on the bench for it. And it really.
What's your view on Kolasianc? What do you think? What's going on there?
Well,
you tell me.
I mean, it is tough, right? I mean, I am not one to ever believe the idea that Arsene Wenger got forced to sign a player, had a player forced on him that he didn't want. I mean, even though there are some circumstances where you can definitely say maybe a player was more what he wanted than a certain other player that he might have gotten talked into a little bit, I just wonder if he hasn't brought the qualities to the team that they wanted. I mean, Xhaka hasn't brought the qualities to the team in a lot of ways that they wanted, but he's been played by virtue of the fact that we were just so short in that area of the pitch. But the way Nacho Monreal has played, and the way, to some extent, Maitland-Niles played in there, made Kolasianc a little bit expendable, and not to mention the fact he had some niggles and injuries and stuff that had stunted his development with the team. Now, I think he still has a role to play, certainly, but it looks like that role is backup, and based on the wages that I'm sure we're paying him coming from a free transfer from the Bundesliga, you have to worry about whether or not you can have that kind of player being a squad player. I mean, what about you?
I think there's a story there. I think it's a story there that we don't know.
So you think it's a power struggle type signing?
I just think there's a story. I just think I'd rather think it's injury, but the longer I see it, I just wonder what's happening there. I wanna say it's injury. Hip injuries are hard to recover from, but he's just not featuring at the moment. He's not an option. We rested. He got a few minutes tonight, but I don't know. There's something happening there. I remember the early part of the season. I loved what I saw, like everybody did. We loved that physicality, that edge, that
especially
manliness.
In the attacking half, though. I mean, I think his biggest impact was made in the attacking half. But Clive, what really changed is his distribution dropped off dramatically. I mean, he had games where he was passing in the 50, 60 percentile.
Yeah, I think it depends on his partner. I think he's very reliant on Alexis. I think the Alexis and him combination was very, very good. And I watched the game in a pub tonight, and I was talking a lot about. I'm gonna go into a long one here, mate. So be ready.
Just mute my microphone and go read the newspaper.
There's something that we all miss sometimes, and when we're analysing games, right? So we all analyse players, we analyse systems, we judge players. We've all got our own story by which we judge players from, right? So, but there's one thing I think we forget, and all the best teams in our history, and the best teams we remember, there's one thing that they have, and that's chemistry, and that's fit. And when players play well, they normally fit with somebody else. There's normally a partnership, there's normally a balance to the team, which allows them to deliver on their best attributes, right? So if you think back to the best Arsenal teams you can remember, your favourite Arsenal teams, there was good players in that team, but that's not the only thing. We've always had good players. What we saw in the previous teams that we all love and all remember and all name, there was a huge chemistry, there was huge relationships, there was a huge fit, there was huge defined roles, there was a balance. And what we have in this group is we have really talented footballers, but there is no chemistry. There's no more than 1 or 2 partnerships. There needs to be 5 or 6 or 7 partnerships in a team to really make it flow, to really make it consistent, to really make it fearful. Yeah. And what we've done, in our buying policy, and I think there's a guy on Twitter we were discussing this week. So I'm very when I do these podcasts, I'm very, very keen to be authentic, right, and not to take anyone else's points. There's a guy called Petite Ponytail that me and him were discussing, and he said something to me the other day. He goes to me, Clive, he goes, our transfer policy has been very reactive. And he went through a few examples. And even Danny Welbeck, when we bought him, when did we buy him? We suffered an injury pre-season, and we had to have a striker because I think Giroud was out for 2-3 months, and we bought him. And he's done well. A lot of people like him. He's a great guy, very popular. But he spent nearly 2 years out injured. And it's just like, that's where we are. And come the moment now, we buy 2 other centre-forwards at the cost of £90 million. One's ineligible and one's injured. And we're now looking at Danny Welbeck with a bad knee injury playing on a plastic pitch. And I'm looking at saying, is that really what Arsenal's about? Can't we be more strategic in how we buy and how we recruit? And I think we need to really look at this. And this is why we're failing as a group. We haven't got the chemistry. We have got the players, but we haven't thought about how they fit together. And I think we need to fix that, be brave, and say, you're a good player, mate. You are a really good player for somebody else. But for us, you don't work. But who's making that call, Elliot? Who's saying...
Well, we know who's going to make that call going forward. It's going to be Sven Mislintat and Raul with the input of whoever the next manager is. But I have to believe that Arsene has still been the primary voice in providing that input.
So a manager, a recruitment guy can recruit. A contracts guy can deal with the contracts. A head of football operations guy can develop the relationships with his black book. But the manager, the coach, has to be the one to knit it all together. And my worry is, where Wenger's failing is not on, well, you could say on spotting talent. I think it's fitting talent together so they maximise themselves, so they improve. I think he has players in situations like Xhaka. We can name loads, I'm sure you could, that are really out there on the football pitch, but they're not best placed to succeed. And to do that, there needs to be a system, a balance, a partner, a fit, a chemistry to maximise people. So if you think back to the favourite team, let's go back to what I call the 2008 midfield, right? With Fabregas, Kleb, Rosicky, Flamini, with Van Persie ahead of them. That was a fit. You had a playmaker, you had a dog runner, you had a dribbler, you had a guy that could accelerate the play. They all could sprint into challenges apart from Fabregas. You had a finisher, you had an exclamation point. They were all a similar age. And it was a fit, it was a chemistry. Right? So, and of course the Invincible side, we can all name that, and the partnerships, relationships there. And I think he's lost that. He's lost the ability to knit a team together. And he's creating a huge debate amongst us as fans. Xhaka's a great example of a good player that does not fit our team. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, you hear it in Arsene Wenger's defense of his transfer strategy over the summers and Januaries too, where he says, find me players who are better than the ones we have that we can buy. But the question isn't whether we need to find players who are better than what we have, but better fit than what we have, right? I mean,
exactly.
There are plenty of people that think Granit Xhaka is a good player, and he may well be a good player. That is certainly open for debate, but he may well be. There is no question he is not a fit. And you talk about partnerships, and for a long time this was the issue. Giroud's a good player, but was he best fit with Alexis and Ozil? And Xhaka may be a good player, but does he really fit with the midfielders that we have around him? Santi Cazorla was the only player that could make Francis Coquelin fit. Koscielny and Mustafi, both a little bit rash, a little bit front-footed. Maybe they don't fit together as central defenders. And you're absolutely right. Throughout the pitch, we see that issue of a fit. Now, I think as we look at the team that played tonight, we did get a glimpse at something that we've talked about, so I think we should bring it up, and we'll come back to Danny Welbeck, but Ainsley Maitland-Niles did get to play in central midfield. I actually thought, ironically, he started somewhat poorly, even though we started really well. I thought he picked it up. He came into the game well, but what you really saw, what was eye-catching for me, were some recovery runs he made that our other central midfielders just can't make, and that was refreshing to see. Yeah. I don't think this was a 10 out of 10 performance from him, but the qualities that he showed, and some of it was that lackadaisical quality as well, and I don't think we can overlook that, where he sometimes let his man run by him and dropped his head and took a minute to recover. But overall, what was your sense of seeing him in the central midfield for really the first time in a significant moment?
It's a huge moment for him, right? So if you should put yourself in his boots, right? He's been at Arsenal since he was like, well, I don't know, 9, 10 years of age. He's gone through all the different phases, 10 to 12s, you go 14 to 16s, then you get your scholarship, and then you become a scholar, then you become a pro. He goes out on loan, he comes back, he's kept, he has a few injury issues, had a few issues with his mum, and basically he gets into the first team squad. And then he starts to play in the first team, and he plays at left back primarily, right? So, and he does quite well. He ends up playing Premiership games, and then all of a sudden you get this moment, you get this one chance to play in centre midfield, away in Sweden, -5 on a plastic pitch. And he's thinking, well, this is my moment. We've got a new recruitment guy coming. We're going to get new players in. I have to show everybody I can perform in this role. They can trust me. I want to be at least a minimal backup player in centre midfield. Now Coquelin's gone. And potentially I can help back up at right back. But I've got to show it. I've got to show it now. Sometimes it's not surprising that someone's a little bit nervous, a little bit inhibited at the start of games. Even the fact that we've seen him play in the first team before, I never sort of worry about that. I hope he gets more chances, because we can all see he can move, right? So
makes a nice change.
Yeah, exactly. We just fresh off North London Derby, where Spurs ran 5 kilometres more than we did as a collective, and to see a player there that once someone goes by him, he can just run back and take the ball off him as if it was like a piece of candy. It's quite refreshing, rather than seeing our players run back and the gap between them and the opposing attacker is just not reducing. I think, we've got to get much more two-way players in our team, players that are happy in possession, but also switch on out of possession. And I was having a discussion just now thinking, we've got players in midfield like Xhaka, El Neni, Jack, Ramsey, those 4, all great on the ball. Off the ball, not so sure. If you add Ozil and Mkhitaryan to that, that's 6 players. Mkhitaryan we're just getting to know, and strangely enough, he seems to have a lot more off the ball than I originally thought. But that's 6 key players that are central to our future, potentially, that are not very good when the opposition has the football. And we've got to decide, is that what we want to be? How many of those 6 do we want to retain? What roles are they going to play? How are we going to develop our team going forward? How are we going to develop that fit and chemistry and identity, while recognising that the game is far more potentially moving towards what you do when other people have the ball, how you create mistakes, how you minimalise your chance for offensive football. It's much easier to coach when someone else has the ball than coach when you have the ball. I really respect Wenger for his on-the-ball coaching, but he's put that at a priority over what we do off the ball. And I'm afraid off the ball, people are picking us off and beating us, right? So.
and you even saw some of it tonight, by the way. I mean, I think it is easy to dismiss this game, and especially when you go up 2-0 away as quickly as we did, and on a cold night, and you said, plastic pitch, there is the opportunity to switch off. But the moment they put us under the slightest pressure, we really struggled with it. And it is a reason for concern, because it is something that we've seen happen so much this season. I think Tim has talked a lot about it, which is that these smaller teams are starting to figure out that there's nothing to fear, and that if they have a go at us, they can get some joy. And our Europa League has actually gone this way, Clive, a lot. We've started games where we've dominated these intimidated smaller sides who, as the game wears on, come to realize that they can get at us and start to. And I thought that happened tonight, but it was too late for Ostersunds. And so, I think Maitland-Niles did well. Look, the fact that he could dribble the ball, he did that, something Xhaka doesn't do. And the fact that he had the recovery pace was great to see. Again, something that our central midfield doesn't really do. But I do think that there was a lackadaisical element to his play off the ball. I thought he let some people run by him at times, and he just has to stay switched on. And the problem is, the more players you see come into the side and switch off the ball, the harder it is to think it's the players, and the more you have to think it's about the way they're drilled and the way they're prepared. I don't know how you can see so many players be so switched off when they don't have the ball and believe that it's down to the individuals at that point. Now,
sorry,
no, go ahead, please. Yeah, no, that's it.
I was going to say, well, it's down to the culture, right? So when you train, and you train for Arsenal, I've seen Arsenal train, and the quality of the training is just unbelievable. You know, I watched Kieran Gibbs train once, and we used to moan about him and his touch and his decision making. I saw him play a short space passing drill, and I'm thinking, oh my God, you are unbelievable. You know, and everything we do is all about what we do on the ball, quick decisions, pictures, moving it, one touch, head up, never bend your back. And that's what we do. That's what we're judged on. So when you watch Arsenal, I sometimes think we're thick on the ball. I think our decision making is not great. But you can see an Arsenal player has a smoothness, how they receive it, how they move it. There's something about an Arsenal footballer when we have the football. But we have to think about the other side, right? And I think Wenger has obviously created an environment where that's not an emphasis. That's not a punishment. That's not an accountability. And so we're lucky that Maitland-Niles can run 100 metres in 8 seconds and he can catch up with his mistakes. But really, we should be saying to him, that's not quite right. We need to work on that. You need to stay alert. You need to spin your head. You have the 2-second rule. Don't stare at the ball for more than 2 seconds. If you're staring at the ball for more than 2 seconds, that means you're missing something. So you develop a picture, develop a defensive picture. Don't rely on your speed like you have done as a youth, because you can just catch up every kid who's 17 out there, because you're playing against men and they will smash it into your net. So be aware, we want you to be a defensive player, and we have to coach you in such a way. And I just think that's where we're missing out on, Elliot. I just don't think we're holding people to account. This is not to criticise the player, because the players learn in front of our eyes.
Well, look, think about it this way, Clive, just to cut across you for a minute to keep this pod on brand. Look, think about it. When a teacher or a boss or someone at work criticizes you repeatedly for something or calls out a mistake you make, those are the mistakes that stick. Those are the things you try to correct. If you make mistakes that don't get caught, that don't get identified, a lot of times you won't correct them because you may not even know to correct them or identify them. And look after the North London derby. What was the thing the manager was most upset about? It wasn't we lost sight of our runners, we lost track of players in our own box, we were too unprepared every time they took a quick restart. They were able to beat us. No, what did he specifically call out? He said, we had chances to break, and at this level, you cannot miss those opportunities. Arsene Wenger focused on the way our counterattacks, the way our final ball came up short. Fair enough, there were cases of that. But that's the culture at the club. You know, the culture at the club is you have to play a better final ball. You have to find the player running into space. You have to finish your chances. When I certainly think he could have just as easily have focused on the defensive and off-the-ball deficiencies in that game, but he chose not to make that the teachable moment. So, and who knows what he does behind closed doors. Look, I think there's a lot of overarching issues that we've touched on.
Great point.
Well, you know, it just you take your cues from what your boss says to you and to the public. And I realize sometimes the things he says in public are not consistent with what he's saying behind closed doors. But he was pretty exercised about it. He was pretty upset about that final ball issue in the North London derby. And by the way, I thought it was a problem in this game. I thought we had a lot of counterattacking chances that we did not execute effectively. Mkhitaryan guilty at some points again. He seems to have a little sloppiness in his game that I didn't expect him to have. Now, some of that may be that he just hasn't been playing a lot of football for United, and so he's getting himself into form. But a lot of it is Danny Welbeck. He had some pretty unfortunate moments, some selfish moments, which maybe is him trying too hard to impress, where he could have made the easy pass and set someone up. A lot of his runs were going from central areas into wide areas, but his body shape meant that he was closed off when he received it, so he couldn't give it back. Overall, I thought, you know, injury form aside and the pitch aside and the weather aside, this was consistent with what we've seen from Welbeck. And so my question to you is really a two-parter. One, what do you think of what you saw from Welbeck? And two, where does this leave us for this competition? If Lacazette were to miss the round of 16, which, you know, depending on the prognosis for his recovery, he's right around missing one or both legs of the round of 16. So what did you make of Welbeck, and where would you go with this center forward position for the next round?
Well, he's our option. Wenger has bigged him up this week and said I prefer him there. And he played very well in the cup final. There was a system, there was a pattern. He moved people around. But he had
a goal score. I'll cut across you again because why not? Let's just keep doing that.
Yeah,
it's just the two of us. I still can't give you room to talk. Look, and my point is, Welbeck's running and energy and physicality and aerial dominance, ability to win the duels. That's great if someone else can take on the responsibility for goal scoring. So like an Alexis, Welbeck makes the deepest run, pushes the defense back, and Alexis runs into the space he leaves behind. Okay, That's workable. But when Alexis is not there and the person who has to score the goals, who has to take the responsibility for the end product, I realize that wasn't the case tonight, but you would think against better opposition, is Welbeck. That's a totally different proposition.
So we're back to what I said before. We're back to fit. In the cup final, we had an 11 that fitted. We had a strategy, we had a plan, we pushed them back, and we had a goal scorer behind a guy that was used as a battering ram to physically move people around. What's changed? We all know that Danny Welbeck, sorry mate, no longer are you just going to run around and try to be a player that creates an intangible moment that can create the difference out of nothing. You can score out of nothing. We're actually expecting you to be our centre forward and our main man to score a goal. And that's a completely different expectation and responsibility, right? And none of us, we're all nervous about it because we all know that he has many talents and abilities, but sure-footedness in the penalty area when it comes to decision-making and shooting and scoring maybe isn't his number one strength. So we're all a little bit nervous about what comes ahead. And
feels like a big miss in a striker.
Yeah, it just feels like and he's a forward player. That's what he is. He's a forward. At the highest level, for me, he's one of a front three that's not got a fixed position or responsibility. He absolutely
that's
needs
all
another
of our
scorer
players,
with
Clive.
him.
They all, Ozil, Mkhitaryan, they're all go where you want players.
They all go where you like players. Sometimes you get a chance to watch other teams, and I think you can learn a lot about yourself when you watch others. And, I watched Liverpool this week, and there's just defined roles. They've got a false nine that works very hard. He's the first defender. He's the guy that sets the trigger in Firmino. He's the one that sets the defensive trigger. They have two lazy wide forwards that don't work hard. They have a midfield three that work very hard to allow their goal scorers not to work hard. So they work hard going forward. And they cause problems, and they're rested, they've got energy. Their back four's not great. So they put a £75 million player in the middle of the back four to try to reduce the drama back there. The goalkeeper throws them in. They're not a complete article, but we can see where they're going. We can see what they're developing. When Naby Keita comes in, we can more or less picture where he's going to play, what he's going to do. With Arsenal at the moment, we're not there yet. We haven't got that fit. We haven't got that system. We haven't got that player profile. What makes an Arsenal player? We've lost it because we're reactive when we buy. But I don't want to be too doom-laden. I do feel we're starting to think about this right now. But I'm afraid there's an issue, Elliot. There's an issue with our manager. He's the person that decides how things fit together. Other people will buy. Other people will recruit. But he'll be the one that fits them. And I don't trust him anymore. I don't trust him to put the right players. And when I saw that team name tonight, and I looked at the names on that team sheet, I know we got a few people out. It just didn't inspire me, that team. It just didn't inspire me. It just looked like, okay, we're relying on Welbeck. The back four's okay. We got a guy in Callum Chambers playing centre-half that Fulham were trying to take on loan in the break. That tells you his level. Right, and we got Mustafi. No one trusts him.
He was the better of the two centre backs.
He was the better of the two. Mustafi, we don't trust him. Bellerin plays every minute of every game, and surely at some point someone's going to let him have a bit of a rest. We just look at this team, and I'm just thinking, okay, where is this going? Is it inspiring me?
Well, what's scary is what's the better... I think this is really where we're at. If I said to you, it's the round of 16 now, and you have to pick an 11 for the first leg of the round of 16, and Lacazette's not available. Other than Koscielny, is there a better group that you can pick? I mean, the scary thing is this isn't like it was a heavily rotated side. I mean, there's not a lot of options there that are going to make this a better team.
Yeah, there isn't. But
would you go with Welbeck? I mean, look, you're the manager. It's the day of the game. It's round of 16. It's let's say it's someone decent. It's a Nice or an Atalanta or not a Dortmund, not one of the really big sides, but like a good team that you have to respect, and it's away. Are you just going to stick with this group?
We may have to. Obviously Ramsey and Wilshere can come back into this, and they bring a lot of personality to Arsenal. I think, if anything, the team lacked personality today. We saw some names on the pitch, but we didn't see those players that bring something, that brings more than just play. They bring themselves and they influence. I came in tonight, I spoke to my son, and he said, "What do you think about Welbeck?" He said, "Yeah, he's all right, but he doesn't impose himself on the game, Dad." I thought, that's brilliant, right? And we've got so many players that play for Arsenal, but not willing to impose themselves on Arsenal. And this is why I have issues with Ramsey's style, but you know what I like about him? He says, "You know what? I don't care. I'm going to impose myself on this team. I'm going to have an influence on this team. I'm going to make sure you don't forget me." I don't personally always like his style of centre midfield play, but I watch him and I can't take my eyes off him. The same for Jack Wilshere. He's got a personality. He does things. He says, "Give me that ball. I'm taking this over. I'm going to do what I can do." And there's so many of our players which are faceless. And by the way, we're having an adults conversation here. I am not crying myself to sleep tonight after a 3-0 win. I'm just projecting forward and where we need to go and how we need to improve and how we need to get back into the top 4, right? So you can contextualize this conversation based on, I watched Juventus v Spurs in the week, and I'm thinking, I don't like watching that. I don't want to watch that and then watch us play the dog and duck on the Thursday night. That's not for me, right? So how are we going to get back? What do we need to do? How do we need to create new chemistry? Who is prepared to not just play for Arsenal, but do something and influence for Arsenal? And I think we need to really look at these games are important to work out who those players are. And the ones that don't do it need to go, and then we need to replace them. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Look, I do. You made a comment in there, too, that I think is important. We did win 3-0 away in Europe to end the tie. We were up 2-0 early. They looked really poor. We did look like we kind of went to sleep after that. It's hard to draw conclusions, as you've said, on a plastic pitch, below freezing temperatures. So this is all a bit of a tricky one to analyze because, again, I think there were a lot of worrying signs in this game in the sense that the guy who has to be our striker for the foreseeable future in this competition played terribly, was arguably one of our worst performers. At the back, we still looked shaky. Mustafi was diving in and giving away potential penalties, and Chambers was giving the ball to the opposition, and under pressure we gave the ball away. And so there's just enough to be worried about to kind of lose sight of the fact that it was a 3-0 victory, and that, while being a specialty of mine, is not something we should lose sight of. Let's do this. Let's bring Scott in to give us some perspective statistically on why this was, in fact, an instant classic. And when we come back, we can talk a little bit maybe about the defense, talk a little bit about what's coming up, and then will make you rethink what your eyes told you about Arsenal 3, Ostersunds 0. Scott can be found on Twitter at O_that_crab. You can find his fine work on crabstats.blogspot.com, theshortfuse.com. I could go on and on with his resume. We won't do that. We'll just introduce him. Hello, Scott.
Hello, how you doing?
Great. I am excited to hear all the fascinating statistical analysis of this match because my eyes said to me that maybe I was watching something that wasn't entertaining, but maybe the spreadsheet has a different perspective. So first things first, in terms of the overall team performance, how did we do on the old X-geometer?
So I had Arsenal with a 2.21 overall for this one. And, if you watched the game, you saw that Arsenal really dominated that first opening period. And, the vast majority of that, 1.75 of that came in that opening 15 minutes. So in that remaining 90% of the match, Arsenal, produced a 1 XG, did score 2 goals, 1 own goal. But yeah, so after that initial burst, it was all downhill from there.
So what was the final number again?
2.21.
2.212.
1.12 with 80% of that coming from the penalty that Big David Ospina saved.
So is that a 0.6 in your model?
It's a 0.73 about there.
Okay. Wow. All right. So yeah, I mean, so they still produced almost half a goal on XG, but yeah, that's a paddling, and ultimately they made it very easy for us early on. We didn't have to do a lot. They just kept giving us the ball in the danger area in the final third, and we made them pay for it. But in terms of building up the play from the back, when they did get organized, they seemed to do a pretty good job, and they also seemed to put us under a little pressure with their press. So let's look at a couple of players that I think it's interesting to examine in this game because of the possible desire to see them play there more, or just curiosity about what they're providing. And the first of those is Ainsley Maitland-Niles. He did get the chance to start in central midfield, something that a lot of people, myself included, have been clamoring for. Granted, Xhaka was left on the bench. And at first, I thought it was kind of an uneven performance from him. He had some players run past him at times and things like that, but I'm curious how he looks on the spreadsheet.
Yeah, so passing-wise, to me, he looks very tidy. He didn't really try a lot of hard passes, per se, but he kept it simple. He completed 78 of his 83 passes, so that's, shows that he was, completing them at a high rate, 94%. So that's definitely good. He was very good in his own half, 9 of 9, and 45 of 46 in the middle third. So to me, it looked like he was, probably given instructions to keep it safe, keep it circulating, and let the players in front of him do the creative work. And I think that he did a pretty good job at that.
We've seen him be able to dribble when he's playing a left back, left wing back. He did some of that. Did he attempt any dribbles in this match?
Yeah, he was 2 of 3. So I believe that's actually tied with Arsenal, or his lead. There was a couple players with also 2 take-ons.
Certainly something that Xhaka doesn't provide in that zone.
Yeah, and the other thing that I did notice is that he did use his speed to recover well a couple times when he needed to get back defensively. He was 3 of 5 in tackles with an interception. So he may not have always been in the best situation, but he did have the speed to be able to recover if he wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that we haven't seen at all, whether it's Jack or Xhaka or really whoever it is. We've not had the player who can chase back and cover the ground the way he can. So that's good to see, I guess.
Yeah, to me, it was actually kind of nice to have 2 central midfielders that were fairly mobile. So, yeah, because Elneny, he may not have the fastest speed, but he is constantly moving. And, nice to have 2 mobile guys in the middle of the park.
I mean, we almost, in the first 20 minutes, completed 200 or so passes. So the question I guess I have is, where was the volume coming from? I mean, who were the most active passers for us in general?
It was all in the middle of the field for the most part. So we had quite a few players that get close to 100 passes.
Wow.
Let's pull up the full passing stats here.
Yeah, because, I mean, one thing we haven't been able to do of late is control games in midfield. Now, part of that is because teams in the Premier League don't really let us do that, and Ostersunds, especially early on, were sitting very deep and looked very intimidated. So they gave us a lot of room to play in that area of the pitch. But
exactly, yeah.
So who took advantage of that? Yeah.
Yeah, so Elneny was 94 of 97, Chambers was 87 of 91, Mesut Ozil 79 of 88, Niles 78 of 83, Mustafi 73 of 78, Iwobi 70 of 78. So, I mean, yeah, there was basically lots of players that were getting lots of passes and they were completing them at a high rate.
Yeah, shared around. Okay, well, as far as Mkhitaryan goes, this is a player that I think we're all hoping will fit our style in a way that some people don't believe Alexis did, and obviously against Everton, that looked great. Against Spurs, not so much. This is our 3rd chance to see him play for the team. A very, very weird game to try to evaluate because of the opposition and the way the game went. But how did he look to perform statistically?
Well, this one was actually probably pretty close to what you'd see from a Sanchez performance. So he had 6 shots leading Arsenal, put 3 of them on target, and one of those was a big chance created by Mesut Ozil on one of the Ostersunds early turnovers that Arsenal did when they pressed early. He also created 3 chances. He had 1 assist and 1 own goal. And I got confirmation from Orbinho, who works for Opta, that an own goal does not count as an assist, and it actually counts as an incomplete pass. So that's a little bit unfortunate, and one of those ones that's kind of screwy to classify.
Well, because also, I mean, if it doesn't get turned in as an own goal, it falls to the feet of Danny Welbeck, and from there it becomes a shot in a rosy. So still not an assist. But yeah, in any event,
unless it comes off of his knee or his hip or something crazy.
Exactly, of course. So I mean, because the thing that surprised me though is he looked a little sloppier than I expected. You know, I think with Alexis there was frustration that he gave the ball away too much. Did Mkhitaryan maybe lose the ball more than you'd expect in this game?
You know, let me check his stats here. I didn't notice him turning the ball over very often, but
maybe it wasn't turning it over so much as just a little sloppy with passes and touches that didn't result in losing the ball, but maybe resulted in an opportunity going begging. And the thing you always have to remember is on the plastic pitch and in sub-freezing temperatures, sometimes your body doesn't react and the ball doesn't react the way you expect it to, and that seemed to catch a few of our players out at various stages.
Yeah, so it looks like he missed 11 passes, so he was 82% passing, and then he was dispossessed 3 times. One of those was on a dribble that didn't get completed. So I guess he turned it over 14 times. So not a horrible day, but I think that's one of the things that's going to happen with your creative players, and you just have to take that in stride,
especially if they're attempting more challenging passes in the final third. I thought
exactly.
The challenge too is you look at score effects a lot. I mean, do you see the score effects impact on the data here in terms of when we went up 2-0? It looked like Ostersunds kind of decided they were going to press a little more, get it in our half a little more. We also looked like we felt we had won the tie at that point and maybe switched off. Is there anything that suggests to you that when we took the 2-goal lead, those score effects might have kicked in?
You definitely could, because part of it you could see is that Arsenal basically stopped shooting after that 2-0 lead was established. They added a little bit more later, but they seem to not have the same hunger to go for goal. Some of those, the bigger teams, which Arsenal try to consider themselves, when they get an early lead like that, they think of a chance to, really run up the score. But Arsenal seemed very content to, take the 2-0 lead and, go to the Emirates and, just make sure to take care of business there. No. So, yeah, I think there was some big score effects here that Arsenal kind of didn't really push for anymore after the second goal went in.
Got to stay fresh for the non-match that we don't have this weekend. So, all right, well, that's all well and good. I think we should finish out with a player who I think you could say on a night when we won 3-0 away in Europe would still not be feeling great about his performance, and that's Danny Welbeck. If this was his audition for the center forward role in Lacazette's absence, I certainly wouldn't say he did anything to secure the part. Did he have a poor game statistically, or is it more the eye test in this case?
I think both. The eye test definitely didn't impress me. There was a lot of times where he would make, good runs, but it would go from the middle to the outside where he would receive the ball and not have a chance to look at goal. And his only other option was to turn towards the sideline and then the recycle play. On the day, he had 3 attempts, wasn't able to get any on target. He did pass, fairly well, 23 of 25. He didn't create. He created 3 chances, which is pretty nice, but none of those were into great shots. He completed 1 dribble, was offside in 1 situation. It's not the greatest day. His
not for your center forward against a weak team when you win 3-0 and at one point you have 82% possession. For your center forward to put up that kind of day is not what he would be looking for.
And this might be damning with faint praise here, but his defensive numbers were actually quite impressive. 2 of 4 tackles, 1 clearance, and 1 of 1 in his aerial duels. So he at least has that going for him.
Good for him. So when you look at something like PPVA or XG Chain, I don't know if you have that calculated at this point because I know it's just after the match that we're recording this. Is that something you can look at that might say, well, he linked up well, building towards what we were ultimately trying to get on the end of, or nothing spectacular there?
Yeah, I do have the XG or the PPVA up here, so let me give him 1 second to switch over to that. So we got looking for Danny Welbeck.
Yeah, so were a lot of our supporters, but yeah. I had a joke there. It didn't come off. Just keep going.
Like a Danny Welbeck shot.
There, that's perfect. There you go.
You bumbled it into me so I could finish it.
Yeah, that's perfect Danny Welbeck joke. All right, fire away.
All right, so his passing value added in this game was 0.07, so that's definitely on the lower side. Arsenal had several players that were over 0.4 in the match. So Danny Welbeck wasn't one of those. Just to point out, Mesut Ozil, like normal, led the team with a 0.6. Followed by Alex Iwobi with 0.55, who I think, quietly had a pretty solid game.
Yeah, I thought he had a good game.
Connecting the midfield to the final third. He made himself available quite often. Mkhitaryan put up a 0.395, so I would round that up to a 0.4. Mohamed El Neni was, tidy and everything as well in center midfield with a 0.46. So when you have, that much of the ball and we're able to complete that many passes, you're going to run up big numbers. So I'll have to look when I
do the per 90 or per 50 touches.
Per 50 passes to see how some of these are affected. But yeah, I think overall it was a fine match, and they're in a good spot for the return leg, and hopefully they can rest some players for the League Cup final against Manchester City.
In a weird and disappointing season and a strange place to be playing in not perfect conditions, the only statistic that really matters is 3-0 to the Arsenal. So I suppose we can leave it there. We will not have a podcast after the match we don't have this weekend, but presumably we'll have one after we go through the next round. So, Scott, enjoy your weekend off. Don't stare at too many spreadsheets, and we'll talk to you after the second leg.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Scott's on Twitter at O_that_crab. And you can find his fine work at crabstats.blogspot.com. In the short fuse, we will talk to Scott in the future. But now let's go back to Clive. So, Clive, we're back. Let's talk a little bit about the Mustafi-Chambers pairing. I think it is an interesting situation we're developing because, look, Koscielny is not going to be able to play every single game. We know the state of his Achilles, and he has to be rested and rotated out from time to time. So, first of all, can you potentially make an argument that Chambers shouldn't be ahead of Holding, that Mustafi shouldn't be ahead of Holding? What do you make of the way these two played tonight?
What did you expect, right? So
calamity.
Yeah, what did you expect? Well, Mustafi has great games. So he's the sort of guy that sometimes he starts slow. If you watch him in games, he starts slowly. It's like he needs a kick to get him going, or a mistake. And once he's done that, then he gets started and he engages, and he can have some spectacular games. But his bad games are really bad. And I think he's just a bit stupid at times, right? So he's a player to me, this not the player type that we needed, right? So he's not tall enough, he's 5'10", and he's not fast enough. No BS, right? That's the truth. He's 5'10", and he can play on the ball. He can be outrun. He can be outjumped. If you got designs of being a top 6 team in Europe, that's not good enough.
Yeah, right? Raphael Varane is what you need, not Mustafi.
Or a player that looks like that, right? So we flip to Callum Chambers. Should I just say ditto?
Well,
he's
Chambers,
not very fast.
The thing with Chambers, though, is you would say Mustafi supposedly makes up for it by being an excellent on-the-ball player. Now, we could debate that. Chambers can't keep the ball. I mean, he just looks so nervous on the ball.
Yeah, maybe, and that may be because he hasn't played, so we shouldn't judge too much, because I've seen him play, and some of his passing is really outstanding, and so I know he can do that, but what I know he can't do, and the moment the light went out for me was when Jay Rodriguez, West Brom away, took 5 yards out of him on a sprint, and I thought, Jay Rodriguez had 2 crucial operations in the last couple of years. He just out-sprinted you. If you want to play for Arsenal, that can't happen. And that's it.
Yeah.
Right? So,
yeah, it's not a good look.
And sometimes you just got to open your eyes and say, what have I just seen? Do I accept that or do I not? Can that be fixed or not? The passing piece, he can do it. I've seen it. Right? Once you see something, you know it can be repeated. When you see something like that, that's an issue, and someone's not going to find 5 yards of speed. Someone's not going to give you that security that we are seeing at the top level in Champions League this week from the centre-backs. The best centre-backs, they can all run, they can all move. Did you watch Marquinhos this week? His speed, I know he got a couple of deflections late on, but the way he ran down Ronaldo, that's what you need. If you're going to be 6 foot or 5'10", you better be able to run, right? Barcelona won the Champions League with a centre-back who was basically a midfielder that could run, right? And he could sprint. He could sprint into the tackles. It's all about your ability to move, win duels, be robust in tackles. If you're not going to... Well, I feel we're small physically. Tottenham showed that we could be bullied on set pieces. They beat us in the air. I felt threatened when the ball was in the air. That means we're not dominant enough. Our best defender is Koscielny, as you highlighted. He cannot do it every 4 or 5 days. He struggles to have repeat games. And we're starting to see a drop-off in attitude and ability to impose himself. We need to nurture him. We need to look after him. But really, what we all know we need 2 new centre-halves in the summer, because the ones we have massive failings that I don't think can be resolved.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I mean, is Mertesacker, maybe I'm missing something. Was he announced as having an injury, but it seems to me that the manager has finally decided that he's got to call time on using him?
Yeah, he's having a pension year, right? So he's had an extended year. Great person, great around the club. He should retire, but he's on the footballer's wages, so we're paying the footballer's wages for the last year of his contract. And I'm sure he'll go on and do a fantastic job in the academy. They're meant to bring in the guy from Reading, their academy, which is a very good academy. I know that for certain, because I know that academy. And I'm sure he'll run the academy, and Mertesacker will be like a lead person, a figurehead, somebody that people can take examples from. I think that's a combination. That's a very smart move, and I look forward to it.
Yeah, well, it's just clear why we were chasing someone like Johnny Evans, though, then, because the season now comes down to Koscielny and Mustafi, which doesn't even inspire that much confidence, and beyond that, it's choose your poison. It's Nacho Monreal being moved to center back, or Chambers or Holding, or I guess Kolasianc, or playing a back three to try to hide one of these guys. The state of that center back pairing right now is really, really worrying. So, fortunately for us, we don't have to worry too much about the league because we've already fucked it up so badly that it doesn't matter anymore. So it really is a question of can we get through the Europa League with it. I shudder to think a little bit about what it might be like facing City. Let's come on to a little bit of the looking ahead. I think as far as the rest of this game, I mean, Nketiah got on. He didn't have a chance to do a whole lot. Same with Reece Nelson. I thought we got through the game the best you could ask for. So there's not a whole lot else. The one thing with Mustafi, it was early in the game. I don't know if you remember this moment, but they kicked long down our right flank, their left flank attacking, and Mustafi was in a run with their attacker. And they're running down the end line. He decides to dive in, and we actually wound up with a throw-in, I think. We got the throw-in, but it was one of those things where, like, if he mistimes that even a little bit, it's either a terrible foul and a red card, or the guy pushes the ball past him and he's in on goal. And it's one of those situations where I'm thinking, here's a player way down the ladder, okay? Way down the footballing ladder. And he's not a burner. He doesn't have that much pace. And you've got the end line, the touch line is your friend. He's up against the touch line. He's not going to have Neymar's touch. Run with him a little bit. Shoulder him off the ball. Body him. Trust yourself. Give yourself the benefit of the doubt in this duel. And he didn't. And his instinct was to just go flying in. And that's Mustafi for me. He does not back himself to win any situation one-on-one defending unless he goes to ground. And that worries me. And he should have given away a penalty for the same reason. I know Bellerin wound up giving up a penalty stupidly. Oh, well, there's a final moment. I mean, would you say the best thing about this game is we saved a penalty for the first time since 2012?
It was good, wasn't it? I was shocked. And it was nice to not concede, right? And look, we did the job, and we're not judging these players based on tonight's game, because tonight's game was a job for them, and they've done the job. Yeah, training. Mustafi. Mustafi, what is he? He's a guy that used to play fullback, that lost his speed, retained his aggression, moved himself into the centre of the pitch, wasn't quite big enough to be a true centre-half, wasn't quite dexterity enough to play as a holding midfielder like he did at Sampdoria. So what he's done, he's added aggression to his game to hold that centre spot. I actually think he would I like him in the back three. I really do like him in the back three. I think that's where he's maximised. But really, I think he's somebody that feels almost like a small man syndrome. I have to lay whatever I have onto you to let you know I'm here. And I think he just lacks a little bit of thought process and intelligence. But he is what he is. I wonder what we were thinking when we scouted him, because he does this in every single YouTube video. Everything is a slide tackle. Everything's an explosion moment in a duel. None of it says, I'm thinking what I'm doing. It's quite spectacular. But what you don't see is all the ones that he misses in the YouTube video, right? So,
yeah, right, exactly. That's a great point. Yeah, no one does they should do a YouTube compilation of all the ones he misses. There's plenty of content there.
Exactly, and now we watch him every week. We're starting to see that. He's one of the players that we need to be mindful of, right? We need to really hope he gets through, because he's in that mid-20s range. We spent 30 plus million on him. That needs to work. That really needs to work. And I'm loath to criticize him, even though I do on occasion, because he needs to succeed, for the future of the club. Or we need to find a way to offload. And the market is very, very small. You can't offload to Spain, they can't afford. You can't offload to France, they can't afford. Germany are quite smart, they won't pay the money. So when you buy someone at 35, you're looking at 20 to get back. Or you have to get used to the fact that we'll be sending people to other English clubs. And the rotation we saw between Giroud and Walcott in January, I think it's going to become a lot more commonplace, because the market out there is completely reduced. So let's see where he ends up. If he stays with us, or we could see him play for Everton again.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I think it's one of those, keep an eye on it, but for right now, we're stuck with it. And so, look, the next leg is pretty much just an exercise again, because this is over. They're not going to overhaul a 3-0 deficit away. So would you play a relatively strong side? Is there any reason to play a relatively strong side? We have the Carabao Cup final that weekend. Would you go with 11 changes and just try to do the best job you can getting through it?
It depends. I think he wouldn't want to see an embarrassment. I could see maybe 2 or 3 more youngsters coming in from the start. I mean, why play certain players? Players like Reece Nelson, I think, deserves a chance. Nketiah deserves a chance. I wouldn't like to see Ozil be playing and Mkhitaryan playing against this side on a Thursday when we got City on a Sunday. It just doesn't make sense, right? And the gap's not too long. They won't lose too much sharpness, or maybe they have a few minutes off the bench. We don't know. I just think it's important, though. I think post the Spurs game, I don't know about you, but I just feel there's a bit of a loss of Wembley confidence. I think there's something that we had. We were always good at Wembley. We've done well recently. We've managed to do, not be beaten in 9 games, whatever it is. But I just was so disappointed about the Spurs game and how we approached it.
I don't know if it's Wembley, though. Look, that was a home game for them, although a quiet one by their standards. It was a league fixture, and I think you're always going to approach a league fixture a little differently. I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't be as worried about that as so much as the fact that we're coming up against one of the best sides in Europe right now in red-hot form, with the ability to rest their players ahead of that cup final. And a team that can press you and make you pay for turnovers, and we love to turn the ball over. Well, let's end on a low note then, because why not? I mean, when you look around and you see the gap between us and the top 5 ahead of us in the league, and then you watch Liverpool go win 5-0 and City win 4-1 and Spurs battle back to get a creditable 2-2 draw away at Juventus, does this feel the furthest away from the top teams in England that you can remember us being?
It's a tough week emotionally, right, as an Arsenal fan. It's a tough week to keep perspective. It's a tough week to really look at what you have. We're trying to have a conversation with perspective tonight about what we've just seen. We're not judging what we've just seen. We're judging on what we've seen last week and what we could see going forward. And it's hard, right? It is hard. I am somebody that always thinks there's something better around the corner. I think players come and go. I don't get hung up on players. I think there's so much talent out there. Some of the players that we're linked with, I've never heard them before, and then suddenly they appear as a link to Arsenal. There's so much talent out there. For me, it's how we apply that talent and what we stand for and what we represent. I think that's my concern. If we're still buying players that do certain specific jobs but don't do other jobs, I think we're going to get more of the same. we're gonna we look vulnerable, we look flaky, we look beatable, we don't have a fear factor. So if you're gonna have players that do one thing very well, they better do it very well and then pay for it. Right? Don't go halfway. Don't have players that don't do their jobs, but they're not the best at their primary job. So for me, it's about what we're trying to be, what we're trying to represent. What does Arsenal represent from a playing identity perspective? Once we work that out and we start to settle on a system or two and develop players that are two-way, mobile, aggressive on the ball, aggressive with the ball, far more direct, far more pacey, far more energetic. When we start to see that, we'll all know it because we're not stupid. We'll see it.
Speak for your damn self.
And we'll all see it and we'll all love it. At the moment, we have this team that has massive highs, can't sustain them for too long, and then it has massive lows. And that's, for me, that's down to chemistry, player type, and dare I say it, what the manager's transmitting to the players. I feel as though the stage he is in his career, it feeds through to the players. If they had a hungry manager looking to achieve, I'm sure that would be replicated in the player staff.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, I obviously, look, United and Chelsea didn't play this week, and they are arguably the teams in the worst form right now, that top 5 group apart from us, being 6th. Yeah. So, it may look a little different next week if they've embarrassed themselves in Europe, and we obviously are through to the next round in the Europa League, and maybe we get a cup final victory over City, and things could look a little different. Look, I think what we'll do next pod is a Carabao Cup preview, most likely. Carabao Cup final preview, maybe a little bit about the second leg, but I don't think there's going to be a whole hell of a lot to talk about. It is interesting, though. I mean, watching Xhaka not play tonight and Kolasianc not play, and obviously Aubameyang cannot play for us in the Europa League, so that doesn't really count, but just the way we're going to have to unwind some of the moves we've made, some of the big moves we made over the past few summers, Xhaka, Kolasianc, Mustafi, Lacazette. Would you say those are the impact we wanted them to have on our squad? Would you say those players have become the bedrock of the competitive Arsenal? I mean, because that's right. That's what you do. You go into the market and you say, all right, we're not competing for the title, so we're going to make some moves that are going to point us in the direction, an upward trajectory to where we can get back in the top 4 and compete for titles. And the acquisitions we've made, Mustafi, Xhaka, Kolasianc, Lacazette, and I'm not ruling Lacazette out yet, obviously. Hell, Lucas Perez to some extent. I mean, they have not pushed us in the direction of competing, and even worse, they don't look to any longer be the foundation of that team. You could argue, maybe with Mustafi and Xhaka, that may be an open question, but you could argue that none of those players are really starting caliber for a competing Arsenal squad. So we're going to have to correct the mistakes, the sins of the past. And, with Raul and Sven in place and maybe a change of manager, it could be a very different looking team. I think we moved in that direction, obviously, selling off players like Theo Walcott and Olivier Giroud and moving Alexis out. So the team is going through some reshaping, and I think there's still a lot more to happen. But this week for me was a signifier that, wow, we are not close to the level of the top English clubs right now, and that's a shame. So here's what I would say, Clive. We put out the best talent we had available to us, and we put forward the performance we needed. Maybe not the best performance, but the one we needed. By the way, I'm talking about the podcast, not the game. So, the talent was what we had at our disposal, and the performance was the best we could do. Look, there's probably 7 of you listening. We're not going to break any listenership records. This game is one that's best forgotten, except for the fact, oh, by the way, it's one of our best away defeats in Europe in years. So there's always that. Clive, I certainly appreciate you turning up for this one. I know this was not a ton of fun to talk about, and there weren't a lot of things. We manufactured some topics, so I appreciate that. Clive's on Twitter at ClivePAFC. Thank you, my friend.
I'm like the Monreal of the podcast, right?
You just
I turn up every night.
And you show up and you put in a shift. And I am like the Mustafi. I throw myself in there. I just throw myself in there again. And even if it doesn't work out, I just throw myself in there again. And I will keep on throwing myself in there. And you can throw yourself into my block list at Yankee Gunner on Twitter. Give us a 5-star review, even though this podcast most certainly does not deserve it, and then write nasty things about Tim and Paul, whose absence led to this being something of an abomination. But still, it's a result. In any event, we will be back after Arsenal 10, Ostersunds 0.